there's so many things that people connect to. Like, people have told me they've connected to like being on other planets or in other galaxies and like all of these different things. So you're really just like connecting, like I said, with the quantum field. So like whatever kind of wants to come through at that time that's really like led by spirit, I feel like will come through at that time.
Welcome to another episode of Awaken Now What? I'm your host, JR.
And I'm your host, Helen. Awaken Now What is a podcast that illuminates your spiritual awakening and ascension. And our guest today is Alyse Basine. Welcome to the show, Alyse.
Welcome, Alyse.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you here. So a little bit about yourself. You were featured on Oprah Magazine. You're a mental health professional. You're a spiritual mentor, breathwork practitioner, CEO of Alyse Breathes, and the host of Reclaiming Consciousness. Now, you run a very successful business and a very successful podcast. Do you mind telling the listeners out there who aren't familiar with you or your work a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, where to start? I've kind of been on this journey my whole life. Always been super tuned in and spiritual, and always kind of had a deeper understanding of people and what was going on. Always was super tuned into people's feelings and just really like knew things without knowing how I knew them, I guess you could say. But my first, what I like to call my first spiritual awakening, happened around the age of 19. I was struggling at the time with an eating disorder. I just really started searching for answers, and I discovered that's when I discovered breathwork. I discovered yoga, and then I immediately after that discovered breathwork, and it just was something that really just drew me in because I was always very interested in understanding different perspectives of reality and changing our perspective of reality and widening our perspective of reality. And breathwork was kind of like doing psychedelics without the drugs. You know, you could really start to expand your view of reality and understand things on a much deeper level. So I started my business in the end of 2019, and it's just really, it's really evolved very quickly in that short amount of time. When I started out, I thought I was just going to be doing breath work with people, and it's just very quickly evolved into all of the other things that I do now, which is, a lot of deep trauma work, helping people with business, people with money, the Akashic Records, and I have various programs on my podcast, like you mentioned. So just really supporting people in various ways on the journey to awakening.
Now, we're going to center this discussion around the power of breathwork, and there's no one better to do it than Miss Alyse Basine. Now, Alyse, how does breathwork trigger some sort of transformation or even a spiritual awakening?
Yeah, so the way that I like to describe it is I feel like when you use the breath, there's kind of two things that are happening. One is that you are thrusting yourself into the present moment. So when you're using the breath, if you think about it, you can't take a breath in the past and you can't take a breath in the future. So you're forcing yourself to be present with your breath. And the present moment is the quantum field, right? It's where infinite possibilities exist. So as you are continuously putting yourself into the present moment, you're connecting with this field of infinite possibility. So things begin to expand for you because you're continuously connecting with this field of infinite possibility. So all of a sudden, infinite possibilities start to become available to you. So people will start to notice that their view of reality starts to expand simply by regularly connecting in with the quantum field. So There's that piece of it. And then the other piece of it is that when you use the breath, you're moving energy, right? So it's different than meditation in the sense that you're actively moving energy in the body. And what happens is when you start to move energy is all of the stuck energy that we're holding, which is a lot of stuck energy. You think about like all growing up and through most of your adult life, we are human beings with emotion, and we have never had any modeling or been shown how to deal with our emotions in any capacity. So most of us have emotions and we don't allow ourselves to fully feel them. And they're just kind of stuck in the body waiting to be expressed, because an emotion is just, it's energy that just needs to move and be expressed. But if we don't allow it to have that expression, it's kind of just waiting there in the body, creating this stuck energy, which is why so many people are triggered by little things and they don't know why they're triggered, or why people have anxiety, because there's all of this built up emotional energy that needs to be expressed that they don't know how to express. It's also why people get depressed or whatever those things are. It's usually a result of a lot of unprocessed emotional energy and a lot of things that have happened that they haven't fully processed. So when we start to move energy in the body, this emotional energy that is just sitting there starts to move, and we actually have the chance to confront what's present for us and move through it, instead of it just sitting there and us reacting to things that we don't even really know what we're reacting to, because we're reacting to things that have happened in the past that we haven't fully processed. So the breath allows that energy to move so that you can begin to actually react to life from a place of the present moment instead of reacting to the past. And then the other thing that happens with the breath is it gives you access to the subconscious. So a lot of what we're reacting to or basing our lives upon are beliefs that we created from the ages of 0 to 7 that are living in our subconscious, right? Based on what we saw in the world, based on how people treated us, based on what we witnessed how we witnessed people treating each other, mostly our parents, right? And we made these unconscious decisions about what kind of place the world is and who we are based on what we witnessed. And we're carrying these beliefs in our subconscious, right? Okay. So what happens with the breath is it gives us access to the subconscious. So all of a sudden you'll have these awarenesses of like, oh, wow, I remember that moment when my mom said this to my dad and I decided that money was unavailable to me, or whatever the belief is, right? But you start to have these deeper awarenesses about the things that you're playing out in life that you might not have been aware of. So once you allow those subconscious beliefs to rise into the conscious, then you have an awareness of them. You can actually make a different decision, right? You can be like, oh, wow, I'm just playing out this belief about money that isn't even mine, that I witnessed from growing up. And now I can choose something different. So it just opens up this whole reality that you wouldn't have been aware of previously. And especially in the beginning, it gives people so much momentum in places where they previously have felt stuck, because you're just moving that energy out of.
Right. As Eckhart Tolle states in one of his, I think it was The Power of Now, the best way to connect to the present moment is to connect to the breath. And I remember that so distinctly in that book. And I had an interesting experience with breathwork. My girlfriend was leading a breathwork session with a couple of our friends a few months ago. And I was laying on the couch, and the woman was laying about 5 feet away from me on a yoga mat. And we were inhaling and exhaling very deeply for about an hour. And about midway through it, the woman to my left, she tenses up and begins to she starts to scream, like these blood curdling screams. They were piercing. And at one point I was afraid that, we might get the cops called on us, because it was intense. It was intense. And it was her releasing all that trauma, that stuck energy, exactly like you were talking about. And when you're increasing the breath, you're also increasing the chi, the body's energy throughout the whole thing. You're increasing in vibration. Do you have one technique, or do you have a wide array of techniques that you utilize?
I have one technique that I was trained in, and then I've kind of taken it and made it my own. And I've tried other techniques, but this is just my favorite and what I feel really works. So what I teach people is called conscious connected breathing. So it's super simple. is just breathing in and out through the mouth in a circular pattern with no space between the inhale and the exhale. So it's just circular breath moving. And the reason why we use the mouth is because you just get in that way.
Right.
And it allows the momentum to move. Sometimes with the nose, it can be more like, and there's nothing wrong with breathing in and out through the nose. It's just a different experience where it can be a little more like relaxing and creates more of like a relaxing feeling in the body, where like this, what we're going for here is moving energy. So it's less about like relaxing the body, and there's nothing wrong with relaxing the body either, but
Right.
it's like we want to move energy. We want energy to process and move, and we want to get momentum. So that's why we use the mouth. And then also just to speak to what you shared about like the woman screaming and stuff, it's very interesting because, you know, with breath work, you can either do it on your own or with somebody one-on-one or in a group. And there's benefits to both. And one of the benefits of the group is that you have other people who are processing emotions, and it actually helps you to process emotions as well. So, and I've been in those situations too. Like there was when I lived in Arizona, there was one breathwork session I went to where everybody was screaming like crazy. And I was just like,
Oh, wow.
because it does get to be a lot sometimes.
Right.
But there is benefit in breathing with other people because you will all kind of have this like symbiotic experience where whatever one person is experiencing affects the other person, and it allows everybody to kind of like move through stuff and release things that they might not have gotten to otherwise. So they both kind of have their benefit. And sometimes people will have that reaction, but also
Right.
it's not necessary for something to happen, you know? And like, that's
Right.
the
If
other
nothing
thing
does
too. I feel
happen,
like
it's
people are
fine.
always like, yeah, like people always say to me too, well, I did the breath work and like nothing happened. And I'm like, and they're like, is it working? And I'm like, yes, you don't have to like have like a crazy crying experience or a crazy memory of something in order for it to work. Like just the fact that you're doing it, it's working, and it's usually working on levels that you might not even realize until later on at some point.
I'm curious to know some of the physiological responses of the body and the chemistry behind it. Like, I heard we possibly can increase DMT production through intense breath work. What are some of the other,
Never.
some of the other chemistry behind this?
Well, I'm not a scientist, but I do know that it definitely, the whole purpose of it is to increase levels of alive, right? So a lot of times we're walking around and we are kind of what I like to say, living in this little sliver of what's available, right? So if like what was available to us is like all this out here, I know you can't
Right.
see my arms, but I'm reaching my arms out really far. We're kind of living in this sliver of what we feel comfortable with, right? Based on our fears, based on our traumas, based on what's happened in the past, based on what we've seen from other people. And we're kind of allowing only this much life force in because we don't want to make ourselves too uncomfortable. So we kind of live in this like, okay, I'm just going to talk to these people and do these things and go to this job. And I'm not going to like expand myself too much because that would be too uncomfortable. So it's like we're only letting a certain amount of life force energy in. And also when we're living with like all of this stuck energy, that also blocks the chi or the life force from coming, right? So once you start to use the breath and you start to release a lot of this stuck energy, you start to expand out from this sliver and let more life force energy in. And that can translate to so many different things, right? It can translate to more money. It can translate to more love. It can translate to more feelings of aliveness, right? Where you just start to allow more in because you're letting go of your fears from the past. You're letting go of your belief systems about what is available to you or how you're limited, right? And you start to let go of that stuff and you start to allow more life force into the body. So the way that I see it, and I don't know how this relates like chemically, but I know that you are allowing more life force energy, more energy into the body, and you actually start to allow yourself to live a fuller life, you know? And the other thing that I like to do with people too is we do the breath work in cold water.
Right.
And that is really powerful too in releasing fear and releasing some of that stuck emotional energy that kind of holds us in these like lower levels of aliveness or lower levels of consciousness where we don't allow ourselves to, you know, experience too much. It allows us to let go of some of that and let go of fear so that you feel more alive, essentially, because I think a lot of people are walking around not even realizing that they are operating on this like lower level of aliveness.
Lower frequency. My girlfriend told me breath work has a tremendous effect on the immune system. And my girlfriend, she's so heavily into breath work.
Yeah.
And she told me this story of this man who had COVID and was trying to went to the doctor, and the doctor was trying to give him all these type of meds and didn't want the meds, and was doing his own research and found that breath can actually, like you said, like we've been talking about, move stuck energy, open you up even more to higher energies. And so he treated himself strictly through breath work, and he recovered in like, she was telling me like 2 days, 3 days, just through breath work, just through breath work. So
I
what,
believe that
yeah,
for sure.
right. What other types of effects does it have on the immune system? Can it get us through other types of diseases, illnesses?
Well, first of all, I think it's possible to use it in so many different situations having to do with your health. But and I also think that your immunity is directly related to like your emotional health and well-being and just like your general outlook on life. Like I definitely think those two things are related, and also just like your ability to use the power of your own intention and your own belief systems. I think those are directly related to your immunity. Like I literally talk to my cells and be like, we are going to be really healthy. And I have the intention that I completely trust that you're going to be able to fight off anything that I come across. And also I have I'm holding like the acute awareness that if I happen to get sick, there is a deeper reason behind it. Like nothing is random, right?
Right.
Even if it's like as simple as I needed to rest and I wasn't allowing myself to rest, or maybe I had to go into this like state of being sick so I could open up to these like deeper levels of consciousness. Like there's always reasons behind things. So like when you use breath work to start to access like these higher levels of consciousness and you start operating from this much more intentional place, you realize that you actually have the power to decide how things unfold in your life versus feeling like you need to protect yourself from something or that you have to like be afraid that something is going to happen, right? So I think like overall, that's like the overarching theme that I would say is one of the gifts of using this practice is you start to really anchor into and understand the power that you have in creating the reality that you experience. So, you know, you really can use your intentionality to create everything. Like I'm always telling people this. I'm like, everything I do, I create like a very solid intention around it. As little as like getting on a call with a client or getting on one of my group calls, I'm always like, this call is going to turn out better than I can imagine right now. And it always does, right? Because we hold that power to inform the energy that we're going to experience instead of thinking that we have to like respond to the energy that we see in front of us. So, and I think when I first started doing all of my breathwork training is kind of like the first awakening I had to this understanding that we actually create our reality and we're the ones who are facilitating that versus it just happening to us. And I think that's the biggest paradigm shift that we can make is really coming into that understanding that nothing is happening to you. It's all unfolding for you, and you get to create the results that you desire in your life. I mean, obviously, it's not that easy. We have to through an initiation of dealing with our shadows and all of that stuff. But ultimately, like that's the reality of the situation.
I love the way you like that you convey and like teach these knowings and the way that it's beneficial for our bodies and our energetic beings. Do you do your sessions online with people, or do you have a studio?
Yeah, I mostly work online. When I first started my business, it was like I said, it was late 2019. So I was doing a little bit of in-person stuff, and then, COVID happened and I was just fully online, and I'm still fully online, but I do retreats now as well. I just had my
Oh,
first
wow.
retreat in August, and I have my next retreat coming up in April in Costa Rica, which I'm really
Ooh.
excited about. So, there is some chance for in person, but mostly everything I do is online.
I wanted to ask you about, I think you talked about this in one of your podcast episodes, how breathwork can heighten your intuitive psychic abilities. Can you speak more on that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So, one of the things that happens is, I always say there's kind of this symbiotic, almost like yin and yang relationship between having a spiritual awakening or growing your spiritual gifts and healing trauma, right? So it's like what I see with people is that as they heal their trauma, their spiritual, psychic, and intuitive gifts just naturally come online. It's just a natural byproduct of healing your trauma. And then the same thing, whereas if you come at it from the other lens, where if you're like wanting to really dive deep into developing your intuitive and psychic abilities, you're naturally just going to heal trauma. That's just what's going to happen. So I see this with people all the time, and I use breath work to help people heal trauma. I do think it's one of the most powerful tools in moving through trauma. So what ends up happening is as that trauma, those old belief systems, all of that old stuck energy, that lower vibration energy clears out of the body, you just naturally become such a clear channel for the messages from spirit, for, connecting with your guides, connecting with your higher self. And that
Right.
stuff just naturally starts to come through. I know for me, now when I do breath work, all I'm getting is like creative ideas, messages, inspiration. Like it
Right.
just all just comes through so strongly.
Mhm.
And not to say like everyone has trauma to continue to heal and all of that, but as you kind of shift some of that, you know, really dense energy that's there, then when you use the breath work, you just are kind of connecting to this higher place. And people have had so many experiences. People tell me all the time, like, oh my gosh, I had this message come through. I had this idea come through. I connected to, my higher self. I saw all of these like guides, these images, with these visions. Like it really is amazing, what you can connect to, because people have such a range of experiences with the breath work too. Like it can range from having, old memories or emotions come up to connecting with these higher ideas, these higher energies, like connecting with their guides, having these amazing like visions. Like there's so many things that people connect to. Like people have told me they've connected to like being on other planets or in other galaxies and like all of these different things. So you're really just like connecting, like I said, with the quantum field. So like whatever kind of wants to come through at that time that's really like led by spirit, I feel like will come through at that time. So it's just a matter of like being an allowance of that. And also like trusting, even if that doesn't happen to you right away, that like it's okay to, you know what I mean? And also the other thing I like to tell people is there's never just one way that you're going to receive psychic messages or you're going to receive messages from spirit. Like I think people like have this misconception that, like the skies are going to part and like there's going to be like this, like, you know what I mean? Like this
Right.
like
Right.
message coming down. Like it's not like that. Like you have to be open to all of the different ways that you receive information. Like I know that I receive information sometimes in like the littlest of ways. Like it'll be like I'll be shown like a memory of someone saying something in the past that's actually like a message of what I need to apply right now. Or it'll be somebody like saying something to me that's really small that will like illuminate something for me. Like you have to kind of be open to understanding that you're always receiving messages. It's just about you actually trusting that that's what's happening.
And trust can be so hard for people, huh?
Yes, it's really challenging. I think that's the biggest thing. And I know for me that once I decided to trust the information that I was receiving, that's when everything really opened up. And I do think, I truly believe, and I actually just finished an 8-week program that I taught specifically around trust, because I really do believe that that's how I grew my business so quickly, was because I just really moved from this deep place of trusting my inner knowing and not really questioning anything. Like, I was just like, oh, I know I should do this. Like, does it logically make sense? Is it crazy to spend this much money? Does this none of it made sense, but I just did it because I just trusted this feeling that I had. And I really do think that that's why I moved so quickly, because that's a missing piece for a lot of people, is they might be getting information, or they might have a knowing, but they just don't trust it because we're so conditioned to look outside of ourselves for validation. And if there's nothing outside of them that's validating it, they won't trust it.
Your work with the Akashic Records, does breathwork allow you to access it more freely?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, the way that I kind of combine the two is a lot of the way that I facilitate breath work with my clients is I create recordings for them that they can then use and breathe on their own with the recording. So I'm guiding them through on the recording. So that way they have the recording and they can do it whenever they need to do it. So they're not relying on me to be there for them. So what I do is, for either a specific client or for a specific topic, I will go into the records and channel what needs to be said during the breathwork session. So it's almost like a frequency upgrade for people, where I'm kind of tuning into what needs to come through for them so that they can breathe and kind of shift their frequency to the next level that they're meant to go to. And then I also have different breathwork sessions that I create around specific topics, in my program, The Metamorphosis, which is my flagship program to heal familial and ancestral trauma. I have created breathwork sessions around a number of different topics to help you move through different patterns and levels of trauma. And I have breathwork sessions specific to each thing. So it's I'm kind of channeling what they need to hear and what they need to kind of feel and tune into in order to shift that specific thing. So I kind of use the Akashic Records in that way as well, combined with the breath work. But with the Akashic Records, it's really interesting because I didn't actually learn about them until I started my business. But once I learned about them, I realized that I'd always been in the Akashic Records. I just didn't know that that's what I was doing. So it's always been something that's really easy for me to access. But I definitely think the breath work has just facilitated an opening for me in general in so many ways that it makes it easier for me to not only really to access, but to trust the information that I can feel and receive. Because the Akashic Records are interesting because I receive information in a number of different ways. And sometimes it can be not confusing, but I just have to be oh, wow, okay, I'm feeling this, I'm seeing this, I'm hearing this. You kind of have to learn how to decode all of it and then translate it for people into words and things that they can understand. Because a lot of times I'll see things in a visual, and then I'll kind of have to interpret what I'm seeing for people, or I'll just start to feel a really strong emotion around something, and then I'll have to kind of translate, okay, well, this is kind of what this is about. So it helps me with just trusting all of that and trusting that process.
That's really cool. I don't know that I've heard other practitioners kind of fuse, because some people are I'm an Akashic Records reader, I'm a breathwork practitioner, and it's this is the first I've get to like be giddy about like, oh, combo.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different things that like I've kind of combined to kind of create my own methodology, and just kind of, there's so many different elements of things that I kind of fuse together, and just my own knowing of stuff to create the methodology that I use. So it has a lot of different elements to it.
Quick question. You're familiar with the Wim Hof method, right?
Yes.
I do that it's one of my favorites. It's one of my favorites. Do you have other methods that you would recommend?
It's interesting. It really depends on the person. It's interesting because I was never a fan of any kind of breathwork techniques where you have to hold the breath.
Oh.
And I think it's because it just always made me really uncomfortable. But it's interesting because just recently, I've been I have a yoga instructor that comes to the house every week, and he has been doing some like breath retention with us at the end with my husband and I. And I actually, for the first time, have been able to do it,
right.
And kind of see what the benefits of it are. But I was so resistant to it for so long because it made me uncomfortable. Like, I don't know, there was something about holding my breath that, like, I don't know, maybe I like drowned in a past life. I have no idea, but it was just like something that like I didn't like.
Right.
But I've been doing it. The last couple of weeks he's been doing it with us, and I actually can see the benefit to it now. So there are some, like, he does this one with us where like you breathe in for a count of like, I don't know, like 6 or 7, and then you hold it for like, I don't know, 30 seconds or something, and then you breathe out like really slowly. And that has a lot of benefit to it. I definitely feel like it just helps with this level of like really like this level of focus, I guess you could call it, that that is challenging for me, but it kind of gives you this level of like calm focus. So that's a really cool one. And then I have done Wim Hof, and I do think there's benefits to it. I personally feel like it like gives me a little bit of anxiety, which is why I prefer the method that I do. But I know there's a ton of different breathwork methods. I just like stick to mine because I like it. But but I'm not like closed off to anything else. It's just something that I've always done and I've always learned. And what I love about the breathwork that I use is it's so simple, right? There's like you don't have to think about too much. Like, I know with a lot of these other methods, it's like, okay, this like 1, 2, like there's like all these things you have to think about, and like that kind of throws me off too, because I've never been good at like remembering like dance steps or like hand-eye coordination or stuff or anything. So like if it's something that I don't have to think about, where I just like get into like a rhythm with it, that's helpful for me too. But I do like I've done Wim Hof, and I've definitely got some benefits out of it. It's just it takes me a little longer to like get into it.
Right. It's a great beginner type of breathwork practice. It's kind of what I recommend to all my clients, but you can definitely get so much more intricate with it, so much more complex with it.
Now we've reached the now what section of our episode. So Alyse, what more would you like the listeners to know, perhaps on the benefits of breathwork, or why they might need breathwork in their lives, or anything that is the last thoughts for you?
I mean, I definitely feel like if you feel the pull to try it and see how it could benefit you, but then if you do feel drawn to it and you know it could help you, my biggest piece of advice would be to get support with it, because it's not like you can only go so far on your own. You definitely need someone guiding you and supporting you to go deeper and really get like the full benefits of what it could offer you. So I definitely recommend, getting support from somebody who has experience to help you kind of move through the deeper emotions and stuff that will come up, because that's something that's pretty hard to navigate on your own.
Amazing words from Alyse Bassine. And Alyse, where can the listeners find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Alyse_breathes. Like you mentioned, I have a podcast called Reclaiming Consciousness, which is a great way to connect with me. I'm also on Facebook, and you can sign up for my email list at AlyseBreathes.com, where you'll get that breathwork session sent to your inbox.
Awesome. And I'll make sure to put all that info in the show notes. Thank you so much, Alyse. That's been so fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
If you like this episode, please subscribe. I'm JR.
And I'm Helen. Join us over on Discord so we can talk more about breathwork.
See you guys next time.